Greetings everybody around the world. It's time once again for Ancient Aliens Radio. This is the dedicated radio show for the cast of Ancient Aliens. Here we interview authors and researchers as an ongoing investigation into the ancient alien theory. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or subscribe to the YouTube channel Ancient Aliens Radio. I have a returning guest today, Mr. Gary A. David, author, independent researcher and archaeoastronomer. He's been intrigued by the American Southwest since his initial trip there in 1987. The following year he lived there for about 6 months in northern New Mexico, and there he studied archaeological ruins and rock art. In 1994 he moved to Arizona and began an intensive study of the ancestral Pueblo people. The last time we interviewed Gary was his book Star Shrines and Earthworks of the Desert Southwest. An awesome show. I recommend that for the archives. Let me tell you a little bit about today's book, because Gary has a new book out, still in the realm of archaeoastronomy, and it's Mirrors of Orion, Star Knowledge of the Ancients. And it's hitting the global scene today in a global archaeoastronomy picture. So without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi Gary, welcome.
Thanks, James. It's great to be here.
Happy holidays, Gary, and
same to you.
Yeah, it's a nice time of year to be relaxing. Sorry for putting a bit of pressure on for the show, but I've been meaning to get you back on for a while, Gary. What a fantastic book. It's out this year, I believe, May, I think it's out. So.
Yeah, it came out in May, and it's available both in paperback and Kindle format.
This is a little bit different for you, Gary, because I know you concentrate on the Desert Southwest, and that's fantastic. But we have a global picture of archaeoastronomy that's very largely unaddressed. It seems to be a lot of people have taken archaeoastronomy and concentrated in pockets around the world. And that's fine, that's great. And I know you've done that in the Desert Southwest yourself, and we need that. However, you have addressed some very pertinent questions, Gary, to the global legacy of Orion, and I think that's a good intro for the show. Maybe just bring in the global legacy that has been left all around this planet and the kind of premise for the book, Gary.
Yes, as you said, I was for the last since 1997, I've been concentrating on the Hopi and the Zuni and Arizona, and of course, I found an Orion correlation right here in Arizona. The three primary mesas that the Hopi still live on correspond to the belt stars of Orion. Okay. They built villages on top of the mesas and at the base of the mesas. So, this pattern, I wanted to see, how many places around the world really had this similar pattern that, especially the belt stars are mirrored, and sometimes the whole constellation is found. But, the belt stars of Al-Nilak, Al-Nitam, and, Al-Nilak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka, these three belt stars that most everybody recognizes, that seem to crop up in different places around the globe. So I think that there has been a major influence cross-culturally on this particular constellation. And there's a lot of theories why this may be. It's a major constellation that you can see over most of the world. In one form or another. If you go in the southern hemisphere, it looks upside down to those of us who are raised in the northern hemisphere. If you've ever been, to South America or Africa, South Africa or something. But this is a major influence on various cultures. And, I discovered this with the Hopi. It's their major constellation that they worship, and it's a synchronizer for their winter solstice ceremony, which just took place a few days ago. And it's a very important constellation, and I try to find different places around the globe that reflect this.
Yeah, so we're talking Mexico, Nazca, the UK, even where we're at now from the show, Europe, Syria, Zimbabwe, Nigeria. So many examples.
It's well known that Teotihuacan, north of Mexico City, that's been pointed out in a number of places that, the three major complexes there, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Quetzalcoatl compound, these mirror the belt stars of Orion. And, it's pretty strong evidence there that, one of these stars is offset, just like the Mintaka pyramid, on the Giza Plateau. Of course, most of your listeners know about the Orion correlation in Egypt.
Sure.
That's the primary one that got me going here in Arizona, and eventually elsewhere. This reflection of as above, so below. That is very apparent. The Great Pyramid represents Al-Nitak in the belt, the left belt star. Sure. So I started going around, looking at different areas of the world. And, right here in the Four Corners area of the U.S., I found that at Mesa Verde National Monument, it's a beautiful cliff dwelling that has a number of ruins in it. But there's this one ruin called the Sun Temple. And, it's really actually an Orion temple. It's an open air construction that it's set on the southern edge of a cliff, and it looks to the south. And there are three main kivas, or underground prayer chambers, in this structure, and they perfectly reflect the belt stars of Orion. There's one of these is offset a little bit. The Mintaka Kiva is offset a little bit. And so it looks southward the way that Orion arcs across the sky from east to west, and it goes, finds its meridian in the south. So this Sun Temple has a lot of different solstice alignments as well. So it's both a Sun Temple and an Orion temple, I believe. And it was built in the mid 13th century AD. So, it's a major ruin in that area on Mesa Verde. So it's a gorgeous place to be.
Just for the listeners, Gary, just to paint a picture for them, when you look at the Orion constellation, if you follow the three belt stars upwards at the same angle, you'll hit the Pleiades, and if you follow the same three belt stars downwards at the same angle, you hit the star Sirius.
Sure,
And when you look at that scope, that's really the whole ancient world that they were focused on.
I think these constellations, the Pleiades and Taurus, the belt stars of Orion, and Sirius, that seems to be a major focus for a lot of different cultures across the world. I know that Andrew Collins has another theory about, the major focus is the constellation Cygnus. Sure. And, that's a beautiful constellation that I watch in the summer, and it's, a summer companion that I can see, as I stargaze here in Arizona. And it's very beautiful, but to me, it doesn't have the emotional power, of Orion. And I don't think it has some mythological connections, but I think Orion is much stronger. For instance, in Egypt, Orion represents Osiris, the god Osiris of the god of death and the underworld and resurrection. So I think Orion is a very powerful mythological constellation.
Let's step into the mindset, Gary, of the ancients, because these guys didn't just look up and gaze. And I know this is something you've researched a lot. They built monuments. They brought the sky down, as the famous phrase, "as above, so below." These guys were really trying to bring the sky down. Do you think that was for some sort of a cultural aspect, or it was an astronomical aspect, or both, or it was like a philosophy and a teaching, or all of the above?
Well, I think you have to say all of the above. It was, for one thing, it was a calendar. It was formed a celestial calendar. And, Orion disappears from the sky, for about 70 days each year. In the spring, it disappears in the west. It has its heliacal setting in the west, and you don't see it for about 70 days, which is, by the way, the same period as the Egyptian mummification process. It took 70 days to mummify a body. But Orion then reappears now in July. It used to be in ancient Egypt in June, but now you see it rise in the east in July. And then it returns from the underworld, which I think ancient people conceptualize Orion going into the underworld and staying there for 70 days, and then appearing again in the east after that period.
Of course, so as above, so below is attributed to the Egyptian god, if I'm not mistaken, and that's kind of where that whole philosophy comes from. All roads head to that region of the world. Sirius is mirrored with the Orion constellation. I guess, Gary, maybe talk about some places that we haven't heard of. I think maybe Thornborough Henges in England is probably very uncharted territory. Not so many people even know about it, if not talk about it.
Well, yeah, I have never been there. Maybe you have been there. It's in North Yorkshire,
sure,
England, and it's they say it was built about 3000 BC. Mm-hmm. And again, you have these three henges, mm-hmm. Or circular banks, mm-hmm. With a depression in the middle that form the belt stars of Orion. Mm-hmm. And it's very closely, again, you see the offset star. Mm-hmm. One of the hinges is offset. They're not in a three in a line exactly. So, that's a contender for an Orion correlation. These are all, may or may not be true as far as the ancient people goes, but we can only speculate that these were used in some fashion. Mm. In 2009 I went to South Africa and I did some rock art research down there.
Wow.
With a friend and colleague named Rob Milne, and he had found an Orion correlation in Mpumalanga province. And it's made up of these highly polished stones, big boulders, okay? Mm. But they're highly polished with animal hides or something, and they're carved with various calendar wheels and so forth. But there are three groupings of these stones, and my friend thinks that this is another Orion correlation. He has found that they have groupings for both the winter solstice and the summer solstice, the way Orion appears in the sky. So these stones are very old. They might be up to 10,000 years old, carved by the sand people, or they used to call them the Bushmen, sand Bushmen, and
I think they're displaced to now. I think the Sand people are kind of somewhat displaced as a people from their original home.
Oh yeah, they've been driven out of certain places, and you can still see sand people walking around. There's one village that the Sand people have been dispersed to, or they kind of, it's kind of like a reservation here in the U.S., but. They've been driven off a lot of different areas in their original, Kalahari Desert region. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I also went to a spot in the center of South Africa, near Kimberley, which is a big diamond mining area too.
Oh, sure.
And you'd see walking the streets of Kimberley, you'd see what appeared to be sand Bushmen, or perhaps sand and other tribes mixed in.
I think another notable thing about the Sand as well, they were incredibly consciousness-based people in their culture. They do rhythmic dance to go into all the states of consciousness and all sorts of strange stuff.
Oh, the trance dance. Yeah, I would love to see a trance dance that, they dance for hours and they go into an altered state, but from the drumming and the dancing. Mm. And, they actually achieve a different level of consciousness through this particular dance that they've done for thousands of years, this sort of dance. Mm.
Yeah, even some of the art that they left as well. I think they have some sort of a link with the paleo artwork of France, that they're drawing the same images that they do on the
Sure, yeah,
transplants.
the paintings are really beautiful. They're under rock shelter, so they've been protected somewhat. But they've also done a number of petroglyphs or rock carvings in areas that are not talked about as much. But as I said, I went to the central part of South Africa, to a site called Driekoppseiland. And this one site, James, it's just amazing. I've never seen anything like it. It's completely horizontal, almost like a pavement.
Wow.
And it's about 100 yards long and 75 yards across, and it's completely flat, and it's made out of andesite.
Wow.
A very hard stone.
Rock hard, yeah, wow.
Oh, yeah, and you'd go along, and every couple inches there would be some kind of petroglyph, mostly abstract petroglyphs, concentric circles and spirals.
Wow.
And just amazing, and every couple inches, and this stuff is very hard. It would take a lot of work just to do one of these, and there are literally thousands of these petroglyphs spread out across this pavement that parallels the Reet River, and this stretch of rock art parallels a river. So sometimes the rock art is submerged in the water, and sometimes you can see most of it. So it's they say that the river represents a kind of a serpent-like being. That undulates and covers some of this rock art, and then exposes it at other times.
Wow.
So it's just an amazing site.
Wow, fascinating, Gary, fascinating. So many other authors on the show, whatever, they've always talked to me about the use of andesite at ancient sites. Andesite being incredibly hard. I think perhaps these guys were making this stuff last through the ages.
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly. And it's just not a doodling process that, of whiling away the afternoon. They were constantly trying to make communication, of some sort. And there's a lot of hematite as well in the area.
Wow.
So some say that women were involved in this, hematite, the red stone, representing menstrual blood and so forth. So this might have been a site for puberty rituals of both males and females. It's an amazing site that needs some more research.
I know a lot of these ancient cultures, Gary, do focus on puberty for males or females, or that kind of coming of age type of thing too. Gary, going back to the Orion constellation, I mean, this just seems too uncanny that there's so many ancient cultures focusing on this. Do we dare say these guys were worshipping gods, or is there an element there that we're not addressing?
Well, I think, I don't want to bring in the ancient aliens theory, because I don't expressly believe that there were, nuts and bolts craft come across the galaxy and set down on Earth and interacted with humans. But I think in altered states of consciousness, humans met other beings, non-human entities that, they interacted with as real entities. And, I think some of these were star people, perhaps from Orion. The elders around here, Hopi and Zuni, say that their star elders taught them everything that they knew, that they know today. That they're emphatic in saying that these people came from the stars and gave us our wisdom, our knowledge base, so we could survive here in this very inhospitable desert. So,
for sure.
There's a number of ways you can look at this phenomenon of interaction with non-human beings. It's just, whether you believe in the actual physical presence of extraterrestrials or, it's a more interdimensional sort of thing.
I'm open to both being correct at the same time, Gary.
Yeah, I am too. I keep an open mind and tend to go towards, the non-physical aspect.
We actually, and just to focus on some of the artwork again, because we do have in your area, I believe, the spiral as well. They seem to focus on this spiral as well. Probably one of the most iconic thing in the ancient world is the use of the spiral, and the people that use this rock art or symbology. They usually have experiments in all the states of consciousness, as well as the archaeoastronomy aspect.
Yeah, the spiral, of course, it's in your area as well, James.
For sure.
There's different interpretations of the spiral. Some say it just represents water in a whirlpool. Others say that it represents kind of a whirlwind, which we get a lot of dust devils around here. So you can see the wind going in a circle here very easily. But there are other interpretations of a kind of a portal. A doorway to a different dimension. And perhaps someone carved a spiral because there was water in the area, or it might be a place where, the elders gathered and contacted beings through this portal. So it might be a marker to another dimension of sorts.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think we can rule that out, definitely, because, people are going to think all the states of consciousness and dimensions, and portals, they're going to probably think that goes hand in hand. It is something that you see on an altered state of consciousness, but I do think the remarkable thing is at these ancient sites that have these, symbols and symbology, the Orion constellation is usually a focal point, or the Pleiades, or Sirius, and I just think it's too uncanny. There's too much evidence there. I think it's fractured, and I think it's a lot of circumstantial, Gary. You probably agree with that, but there's a lot of it there.
Oh yeah, there's Orion. There's an area around the feet of Orion called the Zalos. The authors of Hamlet's Mill point this out, that there's a whirlpool in the sky, and it goes to a different dimension. And it's right around the star Rigel, just off from the star Rigel. And the ancients believed that there was this celestial whirlpool that could be a portal of some sort, a gateway or stargate to another dimension. So Orion, definitely, the belt stars were emphasized, but the whole constellation in some cases, like here in Arizona, I found every star in the constellation Orion corresponded to a different village or ruin site that the ancestral Hopi had built. So it's not just the belts here, it's the whole constellation that you find represented by these different villages spread out across the Arizona desert.
Sure. Gary, in the book Mirrors of Orion, awesome, by the way, you bring up a couple of new places. Let's talk about the Syrian giant, the star correlation in the Middle East, because people don't normally address the Middle East as anything to do with star correlation. So this is one that stands out for me, Gary.
Yeah, and it's sad because a lot of these sites are being destroyed or at least damaged by the war. But I was watching a History Channel show, I think back in 2002, and it was a show about the Knights Templar castles, and there were three main castles. The one that's on the coast, more or less on the coast, is called Tortosa. There's also a Knights Templar castle called Castle Blanc, and then the Croix de Chevalier, which I understand has been heavily damaged by the war, unfortunately. But I looked on the map to these places, and they formed the belt stars of Orion exactly. These Knights Templar castles that were built in the 1100s or the 1200s AD. These were probably ancient sites to begin with, and that's why the Knights Templar built these magnificent castles there, especially the Croix de Chevalier is I think Lawrence of Arabia said this was the most beautiful castle in the world that he had ever seen. So, if you can Google that, it's just a beautiful, white, castle, just iconic. Massive.
Wow. Do you think then perhaps that the Templars, right back in the 11th, 12th century, the Crusades, if you want to call it, do you think that these guys were privy to knowledge then that they encoded in their structures and their buildings, and it's either fallen into underground circles or maybe lost, or maybe they were trying to revive some sort of ancient knowledge?
Well, I think that they were definitely, had an archaeological team working at the Temple Mount, and they might have found something there, some kind of documents or artifacts or something that they brought back to France with them. So I think it's possible that this whole tradition, is from Jerusalem. This sacred knowledge of the past.
Sure. I know you have an article on Templar symbols and links to maybe the Hopi. Just throw that one in the mix for us as well, Gary. I think this is really interesting because some of this symbology seems to migrate interculturally.
Yes, researching the city of Phoenix, Arizona, I began to see some Templar and Masonic influences of, for instance, the man who named the city of Phoenix, Darrell Duppa is his name, and he's quite a character. He's from England, and he sailed pretty much around the world, and he came to Arizona to prospect for gold, and he wound up in Phoenix, and he's the one who named Phoenix, that mythical bird that rises from his
Phoenix
from
rising,
its ashes.
Yeah.
And he was a prominent Freemason, and he's buried in Phoenix in the Masonic section of the Pioneer and Memorial Cemetery, right in downtown Phoenix. And also the first governor in Arizona was also a very prominent Freemason. He was governor for many years, something like 30 years or something.
Wow.
But he's buried in a white tile pyramid. His mausoleum is in the form of a pyramid.
Wow.
And he's buried right in Phoenix, Arizona. You can see.
Yeah.
It's quite striking the influences of Freemasonry and ultimately the Templars, the Knights Templar on this area.
Yeah. I definitely think these guys understood the symbology. I definitely think they grasped it and what it meant. Whether that goes back right to ancient times, I'm not sure, but I think they either revived it or definitely grasped it at the very least. In terms of Orion, everybody's going to know the Giza Plateau and famous with Robert Bauval. He's been on the show many times. Most people are famous with this. Most people are probably very aware of maybe Thornborough Henges now with Ancient Aliens TV show, and most people are refer to Desert Southwest. How did you discover about the Igbo, the Igbos, if I'm pronouncing that right? Because this is something I never even heard of these guys, Gary. And to be honest with you, I was aware of the Dogon connection and maybe some sort of a Jewish Israeli cultural crossover.
Right.
So it's kind of in the same region as the Igbos. But tell us how you discovered this, because I hadn't even heard of these guys till I read the book, Gary.
Yeah, I started corresponding with a woman named Catherine Ochelonu. She unfortunately passed on earlier this year, but she has a massive research project, written like 3 books on the Igbo, the main tribe in Nigeria, and the basic culture there. And I found that some of the main Igbo sites also reflected the belt stars of Orion. There's a city called Igbo Ukwu, which is a main site that uncovered amazing bronze sculptures of various sorts. There's one sculpture that's in the form of a torus, like a donut-shaped bronze piece, and it's very intricate. There are different sorts of sculptures, bronze sculptures, which are very hard to do. It's kind of like a lost city because they unearthed so many different artifacts from this one place. Wow. in central Nigeria. There's also a place called Ugwele. It's the largest stone axe factory in the world, and its date back 250,000 years. So,
wow.
This corresponds to the middle belt star of Orion. And there's another place called Afikpo, and it dates from about 5000 BC, and it's the oldest pottery center or pottery site in West Africa. So these three sites right in a row again, reflect the belt stars of Orion. And, I talked with, Professor Achalonu about this, and she believed in this, and that, there was a correlation, and it involved the star Sirius as well. It's very strong in Igbo mythology. Mm-hmm. And, like you say, not many people know I didn't know anything about the Igbo tribe before this time. And I'm just sad that, Professor Achalonu passed on, this year. But, her books are available, through Amazon and so forth.
It's funny because I just recently had a conversation about, somebody was telling me about diaspora, which is that, there's a scattered population that came from a common origin. And I was mentioning, the Dogon's probably a good example of diaspora. And I think now that I look at it, the Igbo as well, because, it's this tight corner of West Africa seems to have two migratory routes from either Egypt or Israel, maybe around the top of North Africa following the coastline, or I just maybe just mentioned the Dogon as well, because they seem to have some sort of an origin, if you follow the work of Larry Scranton, that is.
Right, yeah.
But they seem to have some sort of a... Sorry, Gary, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And Catherine thought that the Igbo, the area in Nigeria, the Niger River, where it comes out into the ocean there, was a major site, and it spread its culture all over the world. So it spread it to the Dogon, and it spread it to the Nile Valley, and it went down into South Africa. There was a migration route that goes from Nigeria into southern Africa, very early on. And, it kind of spread out. This is her theory, that it spread out from this central point in Nigeria. And there's been so little work done about the Igbo and the tribes in the region that it's kind of lost. But they built huge structures, like in Nigeria. They built this huge ring that it's a trench that like 20 feet deep. Wow. And it's miles and miles around, and it's a perfect circle going through the jungle.
Wow. This is like a henge in the jungle then.
Yeah, it's digging a trench that's, 20 feet deep through the jungle.
Wow.
It's just an amazing accomplishment. And they also built pyramids in Nigeria, and these survived until, these are mud pyramids. In the Sudi, region of Nigeria. And these were 10, mud pyramids that were kind of like a layer cake with a point on the top. And, the British destroyed these pyramids. Wow. Unfortunately, they don't survive today. But there are pictures of these 10, layered pyramids, or step pyramids, you might call them, kind of like Saqqara in Egypt.
Wow.
That the Igbo, the ancient Igbo, built.
Do you think then, because in our modern perspective, we're looking at this stuff made out of earth, and there's just no respect for it, Gary. We don't understand it. Technology comes in the shape of geometry sometimes. It doesn't matter what material you build with. But it just doesn't get the respect.
I think there is a bias against, Earth. I've heard this expressed, the mound builders in the eastern United States. Mm-hmm. They're not given the same, maybe the same attention that, stone pyramids would would get, but they're just as complex. I went to Serpent Mound this past summer in June and gave a presentation there about my theory that the Hopi Snake Clan helped to build Serpent Mound in southern Ohio.
Wow.
But I think that these mud structures or earthen structures are not given the same respect as stone structures around the world.
I had Ross Hamilton on the show. Really loved Ross's work.
Yeah. I met Ross.
Fascinating guy.
Yeah.
The earthworks in the Ohio Valley, then I guess so. Encompassing geometry and mathematics. Do you think there's any links then globally from a common source, maybe with Ireland, England, France, or any other earthworks over here? Do you think there may be, again, it could be a reverse diffusionist theory that one came the opposite direction to what we actually think?
Well, I think, there was a global civilization, after the Ice Age that spread this knowledge throughout the world in one form or another. And, I definitely think there were, people from the old world coming to the new world and vice versa. The Hopi have, legends of going across the Pacific Ocean on reed boats, from the Western Pacific, to the west coast of North America. So I think there was a lot of sea travel, in very early times, 10,000 BC or something like that.
Sure.
And, people got around much more than mainstream academia likes to admit to.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the Dogon. I could talk about the Dogon all day, Gary, and everybody that researches the Dogon usually brings something different to the table. I heard so many different ththings on the Dogon, to be honest with you, Gary. I have an open mind, but where does the Dogon fit into this connection?
Well, the Dogon have, an Orion correlation. It's described in Griol's book, The Pale Fox, that these standing stones are part of an Orion correlation, and they had a strong view of, reverence for, this particular constellation. And, they had some ties with Egypt, of course, as Laird Scranton has pointed out to us, linguistically and otherwise. But, the Dogon are a fascinating tribe that, might have roots in the Igbo, area, and maybe they traveled from Nigeria to Mali and up to the Nile Valley. That might have been one of the routes that they took to get to Egypt.
Wow.
To spread this knowledge.
It's everybody thinks that it's the oldest culture and it's spread out from there, and it gives you this diffusionist theory. But that only assumes if you're correct with your information. Like I say, I've never heard of the Igbo, but it makes sense that maybe these guys came the other way around, that they spread out from a different part of the world.
It's hard to say. I just think there were, all you can really say definitively is that people were getting around in ships very early on, after the ice sheets melted.
For sure.
And, civilization, a global civilization started up. And of course it was kind of wiped out with a comet or an asteroid.
I definitely think there's a lack in the academic world, not to pick fault on any particular field, but to address this ancient global contact, whether that's mythology or structures, iconic symbology or rock art. There's clearly something that's gone on in the past. Let's put a date, 4,000, 3,000 BC. That in around that era, a lot of amazing things happening on the planet, Gary, and a lot of cross-cultural ties.
Well, that was the belief in the 19th century. That was the primary belief, and then these isolationists took over the mainstream academia. And they basically said that ancient cultures didn't have the wherewithal, the skills to travel across the ocean in boats, and they stayed pretty much in the area that they were found, and they didn't go long distances. And that became the paradigm, the scientific paradigm from like 1900 on, especially in the United States here. But, that became the the main scientific, and if you wanted to keep your academic tenure, you had to toe the line, and if you didn't, you were out of a job basically.
And I think,
but of course, a lot of these paradigms are crumbling. The land bridge, the Beringia idea is really fallen by the wayside in a lot of different ways. You find at Monteverdi in South America, very early, pre-Clovis kind of sites down there.
Sure.
And,
I think
how did they get down there in 13,000 BC or whatever?
I definitely think, this whole stagnant 100-year-old epoch that we've been living in, I think the more advanced we get, the more we try to hold on to our old ideas as a foundation, even though that foundation may be wrong. And it takes something like a lot of evidence to pile up before that may happen. For me, I haven't seen many people look into Great Zimbabwe. Did you get a chance to go there when you were in South Africa?
No, and I'd like to go, if I get a chance to go back to South Africa, I'd like to go to Zimbabwe.
Fascinating.
It's a fascinating site. From the photos, it looks like a fascinating site. And really, it reminds me a lot of Göbekli Tepe. The basic structure that's around is called the Great Enclosure. And there are a number of archaeoastronomical alignments in this, that involve the constellation Orion, the various stars of Orion, rising across certain stones that are embedded on the top of this round structure, this circular structure. Mm-hmm. And they use this kind of like a horizon. Especially the eastern part of the structure has all these stones sticking out the top, these upright stones. Mm-hmm. And it's been found that various stars of Orion rise right up over these particular stones. So they used the top of this wall is kind of like a false horizon.
Yeah. That
they could watch the constellation rising up over it. And another thing that I found out about Great Zimbabwe, there's the idea of a zenith star or sky pillar. Mm-hmm. And the mariners in the Pacific Ocean used to use this idea. And the idea is that when the declination of a star or the celestial latitude is the same as the terrestrial latitude, you'll find a star, rising and going right at the meridian, directly overhead. And this is the way that mariners would find their way across the Pacific Ocean to keep this meridian star, the zenith star, right up overhead. They knew that they were on a certain latitude. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if they strayed too far south or north, then the star was no longer directly overhead when they were sailing at night. Well, I found that the star Sirius in very early times was directly overhead, directly over the Great Zimbabwe. So they probably worshipped this star Sirius as as a zenith star, as a sky pillar, they're called, mm-hmm. that held up the sky.
Wow. That's a very important point, Gary, that you make there, that these structures have false horizons. To bring the circle into a geometry or a henge or a wall, earthwork, that brings the best way to, if you want to do anything astronomical, you need the circle, because you can map the trajectory of the heavens, the moon, the earth, and you can start tracking things. You have something tangible to touch, and that false horizon ideology is key to this whole enigma.
Yeah, and again, more research needs to be done at that site in that way, in the archaeoastronomy of it. But I think they definitely had this in mind when they built that oval shaped building. Mm-hmm. They built other structures in the area, but this, called the Great Enclosure, is just an amazing wall that surrounds these various other upright stones. And it might have been from Göbekli Tepe, that knowledge being filtered across across continents and making it to southern Africa.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who knows?
What's your take on Göbekli Tepe, Gary, while I have you?
Well, you know, I haven't studied it to any great degree. You know, I'm still waiting for
more data
to go there. And, you know, but, you know, just a fascinating site. It's a paradigm breaker, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's shattered everything that we've known about, you know, ancient cultures and driven the timeline back thousands of years. And it's just a lot of the circles have not been uncovered yet. And unfortunately, Klaus Schmidt died recently.
Sad, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
He did say he would finish his days there, didn't he, when he discovered the place?
Yeah, I guess he did. But hopefully, somebody has taken over who will complete the work there. You know, it's kind of
I haven't
in
heard of
Turkey.
anybody.
You never know in Turkey. It's you know, the Syrian war is spilling over everywhere. It seems like.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anybody who's going to carry the flag. I mean, it seems to be quite silent on who's going to take over the research. Maybe maybe some more Germans. I don't know.
Well, I hope, yeah, someone who's a little open-minded about these things.
I think you made a very important point, though, Gary, that a lot of it's still uncovered. I mean, a lot of people are making claims and a lot of research, but you know, there's so much of it buried. It seems very early days to make it.
Yeah, and it was intentionally buried. You know, it was buried on purpose. You know, it just wasn't flooded or anything. It was just intentionally. Dirt was poured over these grand structures for who knows what reason.
I know in France, in Karnak, for example, Gavrini megalithic chamber was deliberately sealed 500 years after it was used, like a decommissioning process. I'm open to that. Is there any examples in the southwest or any that they decommissioned monuments there?
Well, the ancestral Hopi would build a village site, and then sometimes they would seal up the windows or the doorways and just move on to a site, you know, and they would break their pottery, all the pottery. So there's a number of potsherds scattered all around these sites, but they'd live there for a century and then they just suddenly move on to another place.
Why break the pottery, Gary? Why break that pottery?
Well, it's leaving their trace, they call it leaving their footprint. Mm-hmm. If, you know, they broke the pottery and, you know, pots are hard to carry across the desert, but
sure.
Especially big ones, you know, there's some of these pots that you see in museums that haven't been broken, are like 3 feet across and 3 feet tall, and there's a big storage for containers for corn. Mm-hmm. And it'd be kind of unwieldy to carry these things. But I think spiritually, they wanted to leave their trace there. That's something that they made with their hands, and they wanted to leave their footprint right there where they used to live.
Gary, I believe you have a different take on Kem or Kemet that refers to black soil or black land. That you may think that's something different. Is that correct?
The what? I'm sorry.
The Kemetians or the Kemet, the black land, it might not actually refer to the soil or the land. It might refer to the group of people.
Well, I think, yeah, it might be black people because, you've seen, some black pharaohs. Sahara, I think, or Sesostris was a black pharaoh, I believe at the 12th dynasty pharaoh. And I think at certain periods, you know, black people, were rulers in Egypt. And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, no, that's not true. But I think if this idea of Nabta is true, you know, some of the people that were living in southern Egypt and, the region of, southwestern Egypt, the Tibesti Mountains in that region, they moved up from that area and into the Nile Valley, and the Kem might indeed be referring to skin color.
Maybe race-orientated ideology.
Well, you see pictures of, you know, I've seen a picture of 4 different races, you know, kind of a black person, a white, you know, a dark skin and kind of yellow. But, you know, you see this mixture. I think, Egypt was basically cosmopolitan.
I agree, Gary. I agree, and I definitely know that. I know there's one place that I've seen, and I see 2 in one picture, see two clearly different races of people. Different skin colors, different aquiline noses versus another nose, longer
beards,
beady eyes.
Beards on, like Phoenicians or something.
Yeah, and it's clearly two races of people, but it seems to be nobody wants to address this. Certainly not in Egyptology.
Well, a lot of people say that there were red-haired white people ruling as pharaohs, and you see red-haired mummies and so forth. So it might be true. I don't know. But I had a question I wanted to ask you, James.
Sure.
About you've been to Locru?
Locru, yeah. I've been to Locru in excess of 80 plus times.
I ran across the research of this guy named Patrick Conlon. Do you know his research?
I know Patrick Conlon by name, yeah. I think I know who you're talking about.
He found 3 hills at this site that he thought related to the belt stars of Orion. Sure,
I've heard this theory. And there's also a recommendation that perhaps the what they call the Hag's Chair may have a link to Sirius as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that, but there's also this rock art guy, Martin Brennan.
Martin Brennan.
Which I'm sure you read his.
He's pioneered a lot of the archaeoastronomy, Gary.
Right, and he found at West Carnbane, one of the hills there.
This Carnbane.
He found a stone that had these three ovals on it that represented, he thought, the belt stars of Orion, because again one of the ovals is offset, just like the star Mintaka is offset. So he thought this particular stone found there was represented the belt stars of Orion. Sure. And I was just wondering if you knew any more about this.
I'm not aware of Patrick Collins' work, but I am aware of Martin Brennan's, and I know I'm actually aware of that reference too. Martin Brennan, by the way, pioneered a lot of this stuff in the 80s, and a lot of it went unnoticed for about 20 years, Gary. But Locru is really uncharted territory. I mean, really is. I mean, it's dating to about 3,500 BC. Right. And it's largely forgotten about. I mean, everybody goes to Newgrange because it's easy to get to on the motorway. Yeah. It's just easy to get to. It's in a valley down low. Locru, it's on 4 different hills. It's offbeat. It's outside Dublin City by an hour. Back roads to get there. It's incredibly awkward. You can only go up to one of the hills. You can go to the other hill privately, but not in a tour. But again, a lot of Locru was documented in the 18th century. A lot of links, some say to Pleiades, Sirius, and Orion. But there's something like maybe 100 megalithic chambers there originally, of which only about 25 survive in various states now.
A lot of rock art there. And,
riddled with it, yeah. Yeah, fascinating place. Yeah.
Well, if I'm ever in Ireland, I'll try to get there.
But. You have an open invitation, Gary. Anytime you're up here, you look me up, brother. I'll give you a tour for sure.
Great, thanks, James.
But again, Orion links with megalithic Britain and Ireland, I definitely think is rich. I think there's some of it may be open to interpretation, as always, Gary. But I mean, Orion.
Yeah,
series...
I say this in my book that these may or may not. I'm just throwing these out as possible Orion correlations. Sure. One that I found particularly intriguing was a friend of mine, Jeff Nisbet, has an idea that there's an Orion correlation in Scotland.
Wow.
Which is pretty, and the belt stars are formed by 3 islands in the Firth of Forth, this bay on the eastern coast of Scotland.
Sure.
And he said that these possibly were even terraformed to more exactly reflect the belt stars of Orion. But he has, the rest of the constellation, and there's one that goes from the middle belt star to Rosalind Chapel through, the foot of Orion. So, he's got an elaborate system and template that he's discovered in Scotland. So this is another place,
I'm open to the terraforming. I tell you what, because there's a serpent mound in Scotland. It's not as clean and as nice as the other one, and it may actually be a glacial ridge that was terraformed.
Yeah.
So, I'm open to all that, Gary, totally. And they may have just, took the natural landscape, and if they seen something they liked, perhaps why they put the 3 pyramids to mirror the Nile as the Milky Way, they took some natural features that they liked. You see it all across megalithic territory. Karnak, for example, they chose that latitude because the moon does something very funny. It looks like it bobs up and down on the mountains. It looks like.
Well, I think a lot of these sites are much older. You know, the pyramid sites may or may not have been built in about 2500 BC, but you know, I'm sure that they were much older sites. You know, in some form or another. Before the pyramids were even constructed, there was some kind of sacred rituals going on, or maybe some sort of structure that might be the basement of the Great Pyramid. There might be that's part of the most ancient structure there on the Giza Plateau.
And as we were talking about Yorkshire, Gary, and you mentioned Thornborough-Henge there, in Yorkshire. I mean, Yorkshire's not that far from Scotland, and Yorkshire, by the way, is probably the second richest area in rock art. I mean, it's riddled with rock art up there. Seem to get very little rock art down south in England, but on the edge of Scotland and England, and Scotland too has got a lot of rock art. Ireland too as well, and there seems to be pockets of rock art, but around Thornborough-Henges and Yorkshire, you got rock art, a definite Orion correlation as far as I'm concerned. You know, you're not that far away, so I'd have to look into that though. That's intriguing, definitely intriguing.
Yeah, if you go to Mythomorph, it's mythomorph.com. That's Jeff Nisbet's site, and he's written for Atlantis Rising.
Oh yeah, sure.
Quite a few articles for Atlantis Rising. So you know he's got articles on his website that you can.
Is Atlantis Rising still going, Gary? Is it still going?
Yeah, I think it is. You know,
I grew up on Atlantis Rising, by the way. I know you wrote there, Gary, as well. I grew up on that. I loved it. I really did. You know.
They keep going. Michael Cremo, I think, has an article in every issue, and you know, it's still out there, I believe.
What's new for you now, Gary? Are you going to keep writing articles, publishing, and doing the books?
Well, I'm taking kind of a sabbatical right now and trying to find a different direction. You know, this book I put out is kind of a more global look at the star correlations and the various star knowledge of the ancient peoples. But, I might be writing again about the Southwest, perhaps the Zuni Pueblo, which is different than the Hopi, but has a different language entirely than the Hopi, but share many of the same rituals. So, I'm just kind of waiting for an inspiration.
For sure. Well, if you want some inspiration, you come over to Ireland, Gary. You'll get plenty here. You have an open ticket.
That's been great.
Gary, I really thank you for your time today. Fascinating book. Again, Mirrors of Orion, Star Knowledge of the Ancient World, and fascinating. You've addressed some questions and put some nice toys. I mean, there's so many photos in there, Gary, and drawings and diagrams. That's it's so pertinent to explaining all this. So, I'm glad to see. It's rare to see a book with so many pictures in it. People's kind of, get very economical with that. But, to talk about star diagrams and charts, you need to see the book. And
you need to see the visual evidence, I think. You can get the book on Amazon.com, and it's, like I said, it's in Kindle format as well.
Wow, awesome.
So you can get it there. I don't know if it's Amazon UK or not. I think it's on Amazon UK.
I think they redirect you anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, your website, Gary, just before we go.
It's theorionzone.com.
Sure, and we can get copies there as well, I believe, Gary.
Right. Yeah. You can click on the links to the various books. Adventures Unlimited Press published the first 4 books.
For sure.
So. Yeah.
Gary, I really thank you for your time today. It's been awesome talking to you. Again,
thanks, James. It's been fun.
Yeah. Mirrors of Orion, Star Knowledge of the Ancient World. Get yourself a copy. It's awesome.
Thank you.